Welcome back, everyone. Spring and summer is the time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories can inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family make a difference together. Today, we are going to be reading A Race Around the World, the true story of Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland, written by Caroline Starr Rose and illustrated by Alexandra Bai. So lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, and let's enjoy the story together. The world was a whirl in 1889. Telegraph messages whizzed over wires. Express trains and steamships flew at top speeds. Big cities boasted electrical lights and a talking device called the telephone. How long would it take to circle this newly speeding world? One travel writer girdled the globe in only a year and a half. An all-star baseball team knocked out the trip in 6 quick months. Author Jules Verne's fictional hero, Phineas Fogg, went around the world in 80 days, a trip so amazing it could take place only in the pages of a storybook. A reporter named Nellie Bly believed she could do it faster. Nellie loved a challenge. After studying ship routes and train schedules, she was certain she could travel the world in 75 days, a one-woman race against distance and time. The adventure would make a great story. Her boss at the New York World said only a man can manage such a trip. Ladies never travel alone, and they always pack far too much luggage. Very well, Nellie said. Start the man, and I'll start the same day for some other newspaper and beat him. I believe you would, said her boss. When Nellie finally learned she could go, she had just 3 days to prepare. On November 14th, 1889, Nellie boarded the Augusta Victoria from a New Jersey dock, clutching a single bag. In 75 days, she'd be back. She couldn't fail. In a New York apartment only a few miles away from the docks, Elizabeth Bisland was leisurely reading when a messenger arrived at her door. She was needed at work immediately. Elizabeth's publisher at the Cosmopolitan magazine, the same magazine that survives today, had just read in the paper of Nellie Bly's trip. Would you leave New York this evening for San Francisco, he asked Elizabeth, and continue from there around the world? He was sure she could beat Nellie. At first, Elizabeth said, I mean to do nothing of the sort. She had never left the country before. She had no desire to race Nellie Bly. She was content with her quiet work. But Elizabeth had always dreamed of traveling the world, visiting the places she'd read of in books. She'd do the job she'd been given. There were only 5 hours to prepare before her train left Grand Central. Well, that sounds awful. Man, the race was on. Elizabeth's train careened west, fierce as a runaway horse. At daybreak on the second day, she awakened to a world etched with ice crystals. Sailing for England, Nellie's eastbound steamer lurched and pitched as though light as a juggler's ball. She sat at the ship's captain's table, battling seasickness. Far out at sea, Nellie had no way of knowing that her one-woman dash was now a contest of 2. Exciting news awaited Nellie in England. Author Jules Verne wanted to meet the young lady trying to beat Phileas Fogg, the hero of his book. But Nellie's next stop was supposed to be Italy, and Jules lived in France. The detour meant 2 sleepless nights as she took 2 trains through England, a ferry to France, and yet another train for a brief visit with Jules. 2 more train rides later, Nellie reached Italy hours behind schedule. She dashed to the pier, arriving at her ship just in time. In San Francisco, crowds buzzed with questions for Elizabeth, but jostled to see the brave lady journalist set sail. How excited she was to leave her country for the very first time. One day from shore, a storm boiled in the Pacific. Waters raged as the ship bucked and groaned. At the last, the storm faded. Elizabeth ventured on deck. She was mesmerized with the ocean's depth of sparkling sapphire and shades of violet. There was so much to see, such wonder and beauty. It was like a page from a book, only better. Nellie arrived in Ceylon 2 days early, such a satisfying feat. She was the first passenger from her ship to reach shore. Nellie feasted on fiery curry and lounged in the cool ocean breeze. She took a moonlit ride under arching palms while waves roared on the beach. Then bad news. Nellie's ship was delayed. Her 2-day stopover stretched to 5. 3 more days stuck in Ceylon. Nellie fretted. She stormed about, her head pounded furiously. In the cities of Japan, Elizabeth browsed in shops brimming with porcelain, flowers, fabrics, and jade. She marveled at sloping hills and mist-filled valleys. She wandered temples and tombs as elegant as poetry, while lanterns swung from jinrikishas, dancing like fireflies. At night, the moon transformed the bay to flowing gold. 2 days in Japan weren't nearly enough. Elizabeth promised herself one day she'd return to the land where Mount Fuji shone like a pearl. In Singapore, Nellie bought a feisty macaw, which she named McGinty. In Hong Kong's harbor, Elizabeth was entranced by the glitter of lights and the sampas gliding in the evening mist. A roaring monsoon battled Nellie's ship. A steamer with a broken propeller changed Elizabeth's travel plans. During the third week of December in the South China Sea, two steamers passed. One carried Nellie, one Elizabeth. There was no way to know who was winning. The other woman, she's going to win, the man at the steamship office told Nellie when she arrived in Hong Kong. This other woman, he said, had passed through Hong Kong just days before. Nellie stared at him. What other woman? What could he mean? It's too bad, he said, but I think you've lost. Wow, uplifting. Nellie could hardly believe it. In this moment when time mattered most, she couldn't fall behind. She'd never been beaten. She wouldn't be now. That night in a Singapore hotel, a noise startled Elizabeth. Her heart boomed in her chest. A tiger was in her room. She was certain of it. Boldly, Elizabeth lit a candle. It wasn't a tiger, but an enormous rat rifling through her stockings and sniffing her gloves. A rat was almost as awful as a tiger, but at least she wouldn't be dinner. I'd rather see a tiger, but whatever. Nellie set sail on the Oceanic, the very same steamer that had arrived with Elizabeth just 13 days before. The chief engineer, so confident in his ship, ordered his men to write on the engines, "For Nellie Bly will win or die." That's intense. And they actually did that. I looked up. Elizabeth explored the deserts of Aden, astonished at their ancient beauty. Her steamer continued across the Arabian. It skimmed the Red and Mediterranean seas. Then a train carried her over the snow-covered mountains of Italy and on to France. By the time she arrived, the boat she needed to take had already left. In San Francisco, Nellie learned that blizzards had stopped the Central Pacific Railroad. No trains could get through for days. It was the worst snow the railroad had ever seen. Elizabeth hurried to England. She missed two other ships. She had one more chance to cross the Atlantic, a final steamer, one train right away. Nellie wouldn't let the snow stop her. She and McGinty took a train on the Southern Pacific Line instead. The deserts in Arizona and New Mexico flickered past. On Nellie went through Kansas to Chicago. Well-wishers gathered at every station. From Indiana to Pennsylvania, crowds swelled with people waving handkerchiefs and hats. Elizabeth's ship, the Bothnia, was one of the slowest in the fleet. The Atlantic Ocean churned with storms, the worst winter in years. Elizabeth was so miserable, she hardly moved from her berth. In Jersey City, a crowd swarmed, thousands strong. Train wheels groaned and slowed to a stop. As Nellie stepped onto the platform, 3 official timekeepers checked their watches. On January 25th, 1890, at 3:51 p.m. and 44 seconds, the great race ended. A 10-cannon salute boomed from Manhattan's Battery Park. Boats up and down the Hudson River whistled in celebration. 72 days, 6 hours, 11 minutes, and 14 seconds, Nellie had beaten her own goal by almost 3 days. She traveled faster than she'd hoped for, even bested Elizabeth Bisland. On January 30th, Elizabeth stood on deck as New York formed on the horizon. The Statue of Liberty held her torch high, beckoning the sea-weary travelers. Skyscrapers jutted their jagged man-made peaks a world away from Mount Fuji. Home. It was as though she had never left. At 1:30 p.m., the Bothnia pulled into a pier in New York Harbor. No official timekeepers waited. Only a modest crowd had gathered. The race had ended 4.5 days earlier. Elizabeth didn't hide her disappointment. For 76 days, she'd given everything just to come in second. Nellie had won. She was famous. She'd shown everyone she was as daring and capable as any man. Elizabeth lost, but her journey had only just begun. She would write and travel for the rest of her days. In this newly whirling world made swifter by fast trains and steamships, Nellie and Elizabeth's race was an extraordinary feat. Both circled the globe more quickly than any who tried before. Both journeyed alone. Both took on the world and triumphed, each on her own terms. And that does it for our book for today, and I hope to see you soon. This is the author's note. I had a book about Nellie Bly while growing up, and I thought I knew the essential facts about her famous trip around the world. But it wasn't until I was an adult and started researching Nellie's life that I learned a second woman started her own race just hours after Nellie's. Like Nellie, the woman was a journalist living in New York. Her name was Elizabeth Bisland. In the 1880s, only 2% of American journalists were women. Most newspapers assigned them to write pieces about fashion, homemaking, or society gossip for separate women's sections, hardly the kinds of stories that would be considered news. But Nellie Bly insisted her reporting equaled any man's, and she asked for challenging assignments. In New York City's The World, her uncover story about the neglectful treatment of the mentally ill led to much-needed reform at city hospitals and asylums. While Nellie thrived in the bustling newspaper setting, Elizabeth Bisland's joy was literature. and she preferred the more leisurely pace of a monthly magazine. She hosted gatherings in her apartment to discuss the arts and wrote poetry and book reviews. In 1888, Bly approached her editor at The World with an idea. After studying steamship and train schedules, she had determined she could travel the world in 75 days, more quickly than the character Phileas Fogg from Jules Verne's popular novel Around the World in 80 Days. Nellie knew it would make a great story. Recent technological advances like the telegraph and steamship had transformed the world, making it feel both faster and smaller. Things that had been unimaginable just a few years before were possible now. The day before Nellie set sail, she had a special dress made, one that would be able to withstand 3 months of continual wear. She also bought an overcoat. Nellie packed up everything she considered essential: a few changes of underwear, a dressing gown, a pair of slippers, a traveling cup, pins and needles and thread, paper and inkstand, and a jar of cold cream in a small handbag. Elizabeth Bisland, who was working as the literary editor at the Cosmopolitan magazine, was given even shorter notice than the 3 days Nellie had. When Elizabeth's publisher read of Nellie's departure on the morning of November 14, 1889, he saw a publicity opportunity. The Cosmopolitan would send its own lady journalist around the world, challenging Nellie's race against distance and time into a race between two women, with Nellie traveling east and Elizabeth traveling west. 7.5 hours after she was called to the office, Elizabeth's own journey was underway. The race quickly became an international story. Nellie and Elizabeth sent occasional telegrams back to New York, their only means of direct communication. These brief reports added to the interest and mystery surrounding the race. The World ran a contest encouraging readers to guess Nellie's final travel time down to the second, offering a trip to Europe as a grand prize. And in the first week of the contest, the newspaper gained more than 300,000 new subscribers. Wow. Each woman's trip was roughly 28,000 miles. While Nellie was sometimes delayed, she never missed a connection. Even when snow stopped the Central Pacific Railroad, the World was able to quickly charter a special train on another line. Elizabeth, however, ran into trouble a number of times. She had to change plans in Hong Kong because of a damaged ship. She missed 3 steamers while trying to cross the Atlantic Ocean. During the race, both women experienced seasickness, loneliness, storms, and extreme changes in weather. Both found moments to enjoy their surroundings despite their hurried pace. The more I read about Nellie and Elizabeth, the more it seemed to me that both women won the race, each in her own way. Nellie earned the recognition she longed for, becoming for a time the most famous journalist in the world. Elizabeth gained the opportunity to see the places she'd read about in books. Just months after the race, Elizabeth returned to England. There she befriended artists and authors, continued with her writing, and met her husband, who traveled with her when she returned to countries she'd visited years before. Most of the trip they spent in Japan, a country Elizabeth had come to love more than anywhere else in the world. 25-year-old Nellie was plucky and quick. 28-year-old Elizabeth was thoughtful and reserved. Nellie came up with the idea for the round-the-world trip. Elizabeth had the trip thrust upon her. Nellie's remembered to this day. Elizabeth is largely forgotten to history. Yet both traveled faster than Phileas Fogg, turning his imaginary voyage into a real-life accomplishment, something no one, man or woman, had done before. We'll see you next time.